Self-differentiation is being your genuine true self and not absorbing the toxicity or the Wi-Fi of others. The more you can be yourself and stay connected, the more mature you become and the more calm you are.
I have an interview today with a fellow YouTuber, Jerry Wise. We've become friends because of his expertise as a family systems coach. He has a deep background in counseling and marriage and family therapy. Now he's on YouTube teaching people how they can separate themselves from the pull, the Wi-Fi, the ethos, and the nervous system chatter of their family of origin. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Jerry Wise. Hi, Jerry.
And it's very good to see you and be with you.
I'm really interested in your talk about the family. And I know that some aspects of the family are talked about elsewhere, but I think you have a unique perspective there about the role and this, like, what did you call it? A super
self.
Super self of a family.
The super self. Everybody, especially in a dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their umbilical cord all connected to this family super self.
Yes.
We don't have selves. It's just this family self, and that tends to be evolutionary, genetic. It's a part of being a human, that kind of thing, because family systems has an evolutionary basis to it and a scientific basis. And so their nervous systems feel each other. That's exactly what family systems is about.
Yeah.
That we are that connected. And we always have been. We're human beings. We're animals, but yet more than animals. I mean, we're not just animals, but we do have a lower brain and we do have a higher brain and we have lots of things going on. And that nervous system connection, much like a herd of horses, make that move all together. The birds all fly. They're always it's the Wi-Fi is working for family of origins, and that Wi-Fi continues today. If I can do some breaking, circuit breaking of that Wi-Fi, I then emerge as more of a true self. Also, it reduces symptoms and it reduces problems that we have, even traumatic problems and trauma. And so that, and then of course it's this anxiety, and that anxiety that I talk about. And again, I love your talk on anxiety and fears. I mean, it just melts my heart to hear somebody talking that way, because you have that as underneath everything, underneath the problems. And I really do think in a family systems way of thinking, it is what's basically unconscious and partially conscious. And it's kind of both. And so if you can work on even changing that a little bit, you can have an immense amount of improvement. From calmness to you don't care as much about what people are not triggering you near as much, and they're not even triggering your trauma near as much. And so that's why I found it to be a helpful approach, which I've used for myself. And I'm doing this based on what I saw and how much it's helped me after trying a bunch of things.
Well, tell me about you. You talk like somebody who was also traumatized.
Yes. And I would say feeling isolated, we had a very kind of reactive, independent family with some physical abuse. I grew up with some sexual abuse, but it wasn't from the family. But of course, the answer to the family was, well, just stay away from them. Oh, thanks. I'm glad I'm in grade school, and that's a good, thank you for that advice. And that was traumatic. That was kind of a forced sexual thing, which is very uncomfortable. And I can appreciate when women have gone through those kinds of experiences. And I think men don't always own up to all of their sexual abuse. Because it's just not easy to talk about for men. Not for women either, but men, like, that shouldn't have happened. Why did you let it happen? That kind of thing. And so I've had my own trauma, my own experience of that. And I tried every which way possible to heal. And to heal from my own family codependency, my own family dependency, and my over enmeshment and connection with my mother that I could never run far enough from, because physical distance does not provide emotional distance. Is that a perfect statement? Well, of course it's not. Sometimes, if you need to go no contact with somebody, that could help. You maybe need to do that. But physical distance is not equivalent to you gaining emotional distance from that person and detachment. And I needed to learn that, and I couldn't learn that anywhere. My whole family's just operating in me all the time. And I know you have a way of thinking about that in a Anna kind of way, which I like also. But it's operating in me all the time. And that was what Murray Bowen, the grandfather of family therapy, learned when he hospitalized schizophrenics and their families for 2 years. He noticed, wait a minute, this disease is all different if you add the family. If the family is more enmeshed, psychosis goes up. If there's more differentiation in the family, healthy differentiation, psychosis goes down. Why is that? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And so
why is that?
Well, because this enmeshment creates a lack of calmness, a lot of anxiety, chronic anxiety, and every family has a level of chronic anxiety. Every family, dysfunctional or not. But healthy families, it may be much, much lower. It may be and not cause much disturbance. But in dysfunctional families, you've got a lot more of that. And it's intergenerational. It's transgenerational. And so when it gets to me, which is, and in some ways why I don't have to blame my parents. Yes, they were adults. They made their own choices. Dad should not have used the bell. That's all true. But where did he come from? That was normal for him. And so we've got this generational thing going. Fortunately, he did stop using the belt, and he also stopped using physical corporal punishment at school when he's the principal of the school. And so he even stopped that then, because back then you could spank a student with a paddle or
I remember
something like that, right?
Yeah.
And he stopped that. So I'm grateful that he had enough sense to do that. And so with this intergenerational, this inheritance that we get from our families, we are our family and our family is us. I mean, we're that connected. And so then if you add trauma on top of it, let's say trauma from my sexual abuse or physical abuse, you add that trauma, now I've got the kind of anxiety and trauma experience that you're talking about, plus the underlying family chronic anxiety. And so what I've tried to help people do in terms of, like, if they have CPTSD along those lines, okay, maybe you could benefit from Anna Runkle's re-regulation. I think you would really be helped by that. Let me help you deal with the underlying family chronic anxiety that you had, whether you were traumatized or not. It would still be a part of the family inheritance that you got, which triggers lots of things. And let me help you with that.
So you called your emphasis differentiation, family differentiation. So
Yes.
what's the gist of how you do that?
The self-differentiation is being your genuine true self and not being or absorbing the toxicity or the Wi-Fi of others.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an emotional process.
Mm-hmm.
Or Bowen would say it simply, being yourself while staying connected. He would use a
Mm-hmm.
simple term like that. He
Mm-hmm.
said, because if you could, the more you can be yourself and stay connected, the more mature you become
Mm-hmm.
and the more calm you are. Because he's not saying being best friends with your physically horribly malignant narcissistic father. He's that's not what he's suggesting you do to be okay. But what he's saying is be careful if you are in a family situation. The answers to your healing is with them
Mm-hmm.
and how you function as a system, even now, because we're still doing it. We just may not be recognizing it very much. Now, if we go, I hate them, I'm never going to be like them. My dad was an alcoholic. I will never take a drink, and I will teach everybody to not take a drink. And I'll teach them of the evils of alcohol. The problem is, and I'm not going to talk to him ever again. And I'm not going to talk to him. Now we've moved from 0 degrees to 180 degrees. 180 degrees from sick is still sick. Bowen says you need the 90 degree. That's self-differentiation,
Mm-hmm.
which is I now mature and grow and also gain inner boundaries, which is detachment,
Mm-hmm.
and also maturity in seeing the system and living my true self, which is me.
Mm-hmm.
And many people say, well, how do you live your true self? Work on getting rid of your pseudo self. People go, well, I don't know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then let's get rid of who you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because if we can get rid of who you're not, let me tell you what's going to show up.
When you talk about being enmeshed in the cult of the family,
The cult of the family.
the cult of the family, like what are a few signs that people would notice in themselves that it's going on right now?
Systems feelings. Let's say shame and guilt.
Mm-hmm.
How many times, and I'm sure you've talked with people that have felt shame and guilt
Mm-hmm.
many times, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
You may have even felt shame and guilt once or
No,
twice.
no, never me.
Never you, never you. Then I'll just talk about me. I had I had so much shame, so much guilt. Every decision I made was how much guilt can I avoid with this decision?
Yeah.
That's how I make it. It's not what is this me? Is this what I want to do? It's what will keep my guilt down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go that way. Much of my guilt and shame was not mine. It's a part of my pseudo self. It's a part of the role that I should play and have guilt and shame feelings on cue
Mm-hmm.
to function in this family. And my mother was excellent at that, and as a shamer and a guilter. And so I would then on cue feel guilt and shame. She would say, by the way, she was late 80s in a nursing home, though doing well, had her whole faculties and everything, just had trouble walking with her back. And I'm 60 something, and she goes, Jerry, by the way, we were talking and engrossed in a conversation totally separate from what she's going to bring up. She interrupts and says, you know you need a haircut. When are you going to get a haircut? Now, by the way, I've been cutting my hair for some years now. I think I
Hmm.
could manage that. And of course, she's treating me like a child,
Hmm.
and she's being the parent. And I understand parents have a hard time giving up that role, and I understand that. I'm not. I realize that. I have a son. I know it can be difficult, but I'm not going to tell my 60-year-old son he needs a haircut, and when is he going to get it? Um, the and so what happens is she then makes that statement. I then am pinged by that. There's a pinging that occurs, or
What's the
that
ping?
the pinging is the igniting of the chronic anxiety
Oh.
that's a part of our family. And then that pings, and then I'm going, Mom, I wish you wouldn't keep bringing up my haircut. Blah, 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 blah. Now, what have I done? Have I made any changes in our relationship? Absolutely none. She got anxious about my hair and what do people think about Jerry and his mother if his hair's not cut right. She's pinged. She tells me I'm pinged. Then if I get upset with her and say, "Don't you ever? Why do you do that? I just hate it when you parent me like that." Blah, blah. I have just now recreated the whole situation again. It's recapitulation, and nothing has changed. I've done no changing in that. It seems like I've changed because I became more of a Viking than a victim. Well, Viking and victim are both a problem. Being angry versus I'll just give in.
Hmm.
But they're both the same side of
Like
the
a reaction.
both sides of the same coin.
Hmm.
And so I'm going to stop that, Mom. No, why don't you do that? Or I could then regulate myself and work on my regulation and go, Mom, I don't know why you may have erupted with that question. I don't know there's any reason why we need to talk about that. Shall we continue with our conversation? Well, I need, Mom, if you do not stop talking about my haircut, don't ever say that again. And if you do, we may be seeing less of each other if that's what you want. But I'm asking you kindly. I'm being calm. I'm not I'm not erupting all over you. It's not the end of the world. I know how you are, Mom, and I know how I am. And each of us have to work on our own, or not. And you may not want to work on your own.
I have sons in their early 20s, and they don't usually talk like that, but they do convey things like that as I gradually let them be themselves and get the signal from them, which they are deft at doing in a pretty nice way when they're like, I've got this. And
I,
occasionally they
right.
don't have something. But it's funny, Jerry, that you were talking about this about it's narcissistic to be so concerned about what other people think about how you're parenting the kids. And when I was watching your videos, I saw that and I was like, I felt really called out because I've admitted to my kids and I've admitted to my audience even that the one thing that ever made me like lose my stack at my kids, start yelling at them, was when I was embarrassed about how I looked as a mom.
Oh,
And then
absolutely.
luckily
That's
I had tools to stop and say, I'm really
and you
sorry.
did.
When I lose my temper at you, it's my fault. And here's what happened. I had fear. That's the language of our family. I had fear that other people thought I was a terrible mom because we were late to school 3 days in a row. And I was
Oh my.
yelling at you about getting your shoes on, because I had so much fear that they think that I'm a shitty mom. And and they were, even when they were little, they were like, okay. And I said, I'm sorry. I hope you can forgive me. I'm totally working on that. It's not your problem. I will keep trying to help you get out the door on time. I hope you'll work with me. And they were so cool about it. But they
That's a good
appreciated the
mom.
honesty. They appreciated the honesty. But I had a lot of shame. I was a divorced mom. I was just like at loose ends a lot of times, struggling to get them dressed properly. One time, one son, he had a pair of Thomas the Tank Engine underwear velcroed to his jacket when we arrived, and I was like, yeah,
Right.
racing out the door yet again, and
But
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 it's hard, it's hard to be in both of the roles, really. the child and the kid.
My family had that problem. That was a part of the baked into the family Wi-Fi and the family super self, which is you must be worried about what others think. That's
Well,
so the family, the neighborhood,
yeah.
the next door neighbor, the school, the teachers. You must be worried about that. Don't be yourself. Make sure they're comfortable.
Okay, I have a personal question here for you then, though, because I know that can be excessive for everybody. But like in the family where I grew up, like we might come home and my mom might be really high on pills and walk in the room naked. So her being herself was actually not okay, and it meant that other kids would never be allowed to come to our house again. So it takes a lot of growth, to start figuring out where is my concern about what everybody thinks excessive and where is it not enough. you
I
know?
agree.
Yeah.
However, I might disagree with you in that she was being her pseudo self. She was not being herself.
Well, yes, I hear what you're saying, but
Do you hear what I'm
being
saying?
well, she was a
I'm
hippie,
saying,
so there was never a day when
yeah,
she wasn't high. There was no,
exactly. And I'm not
yeah.
saying
I
she
mean, yeah.
hadn't done that for a long time
Yeah,
and
yeah,
became integrated into kind of who she is.
yeah.
But I'm not sure pills and nakedness is all real, genuine self.
Right. Right.
No,
Well, we know that now, but when I
right.
was 12,
Oh no, you would.
I internalized a lot of shame about our house and the family and then, myself and then, it's taken years of unpacking to go, that part wasn't my fault. Even though, my family had that weird kind of dynamic where you would somehow end up I mean, like literally the pills example is one where when my grandparents, very proper, were visiting, she goes, "Do you know what Anna Marie did?" That was me. I used to be called Anna Marie. You know
Anna
what she
Marie.
did? She took all these pills and came out naked, and I was like, "Mom, that was you!" And that sort
Uh,
of thing would happen all the time, and still
oh, and
happens
they would
until
think,
recently.
and they would
Yeah.
say it was you,
Yeah, yeah, or
but
later when
that.
I cared for my grandmother when she was in a dementia home for 10 years and took
Oh,
a big share of the responsibility along with an aunt for that and a cousin and and they said nobody ever cared for your grandmother. So there was this strange crazy interpolation of reality where I never got credit and I often got blame. And I was a straight A student, I never asked for money or got any. I don't know, I just to this day I'm like, what was that? When I still see I've ended up echoing that pattern with bosses, with partners, where I'm just like, am I good
well,
enough yet?
and I might say the Wi-Fi may still be broadcasting,
Wow.
and the Wi-Fi, for example, it can be gaslighting.
Yeah.
Gaslighting can be a part of a family, which can be a lie. No,
Yeah.
that never happened. No, it was you, not your mom. No, it wasn't me. But that gaslighting craziness.
I think
You
they
have,
really believed themselves. I
oh,
think they
well, they
did.
may have
Yeah.
thought that really who did it. Then we have another part of the family, which can be the part that's not noticing part of the family.
Yeah.
There's failing to notice.
Yeah.
And so if you're not noticing and that's a part of your family Wi-Fi, then you've got some real then we won't notice some
Yeah.
things because people come to me and say, "I don't know why." I had a client once, and nobody would know who their situation was. He had made a poor decision in business,
Yeah.
and it was kind of an unethical decision, which upset his wife, which upset. I mean, the family. It had to do with
Yeah.
father-in-law, different things, and he made a bad. It just he signed some papers that he shouldn't have signed, and all that kind of thing. Good guy, cares about his wife, cares about his kids. He's got his own emotional problems, had probably had trauma from. But one of the questions I ask is, he said, I don't know why I didn't. I don't know why I did that. And I said, where did you learn to not notice? And tell me the beginnings of you not noticing. Because this didn't happen a month ago. This not noticing is something you've learned.
Uh-huh.
And I'd kind of like to know its origins, if possible, if you can. If you
Yeah.
can,
We're like
that
he engaged in the not noticing.
right. Or was taught, don't
Yeah.
notice this.
Don't notice this. Yeah.
Don't
Right.
know. Just like the alcoholic home. Don't
Yeah.
notice your dad's an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
don't
No,
notice
he's
that.
not. Yeah. No, he's not.
Yeah, no, right.
It's
And
no joke. Denial is a little bit too general a word. It's got many weird, creepy nuances to it where or you see something and you're like, this is terrible. And then 2 weeks later you see it again and you're like, I've never seen this before.
I've never seen this before. It
Yeah.
is a crazy dynamic,
It's a
and it's
crazy
hard
dynamic. It's
because,
weird. It like shuts you down.
and in fact, that not noticing may be generational. It
Yeah.
could have gone back, and it's now still happening, and
Yeah.
people make poor choices, and because because we all have the power to notice, but how come you didn't notice this time?
Yeah.
And what was going on that somehow you set aside, but you didn't plan that all out. That was kind of a natural, normal
Yeah.
kind of thing from your
Yeah.
connection with family.
I'm very intrigued by this, by sort of the social psychology of not noticing things, because every once in a while it comes out. So there's a high school in my area where we moved away from the area before I was in high school, but many of my peers were in a culture where there were a lot of sexual relationships between students and teachers, and nobody said a word. And I know for a fact my friends were very damaged by that. They were 15, 16 years old and taught like, this is cool. This is, don't have feelings, don't have expectations, don't expect to be loved. It was just this, I mean, it really hurt them.
Right.
And then now, after all the Me Too and everything, it came out again that it was rampant again in the same school that had been going on. And there's no way people didn't know. And I pick on the school because it's not just the Catholic Church. It's not just any one thing or the Boy Scouts. Anywhere where adults have contact with kids, there's this huge capacity for people. It's like this veil comes down over our awareness and we don't see it. And I think it was the Diocese of Chicago discovered 2,000 more cases of abuse. I'm like, how do you hide even one case? Okay, one I
Right.
could see, but
One name,
2,000? Like
but
that takes so much cooperation between people, and surely people would have whistleblown. And the reason they don't is like there's this mass delusion. It's like a veil comes down and we can't see. And I'm very intrigued by that. How, as an individual, let alone as a society, but how do we become immune to that and say, I'm going to see, I'm not going to participate in that if I can possibly help it. And I'm so intrigued
and
by like, what can we do to wake up and not be somebody who doesn't see?
self-differentiate, because the enmeshment and the fusion emotionally has within it the not noticing, the denial, the when I have differentiated myself from
Hmm.
you, you would be surprised what I start
Hmm.
seeing
Hmm.
and what starts to be more clear.
Hmm.
I was a bishop in a church, and I was a priest and a bishop. And when I was a bishop, and we had a council of bishops, and there was one of the churches, they had a deacon had been molesting a couple of children, his own children, and then I think maybe a couple of children in the church. And they were all meeting, and they didn't want to. And I'm sure the Catholic Church went through the same process time and time again. We've got to keep this under wraps,
Uh-huh.
And in fact, even said, "Can we have them come up and join your church and get them out of this church?" And it's kind of like,
That used to be the strategy.
what?
Full geographic. Problem
Let's do a
solved. Yeah.
geographic cure
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I said, no, no, no. And I said, now, these people are not dumb. The people I was talking to are not foolish people. They're moral people. So why could they take that approach?
Why? Yeah.
Because their family is still operating within them. And they make that choice because that's a very primitive choice that they learn from their family of origin. But
Hmm.
they're still good people. I knew they were good people, and they would only want to do right. But they were falling on the wrong side of the issue because in their own family,
Hmm.
their families fell on the wrong side of the issues.
Yeah.
That's how I came to understand that better. Because I just thought, how are they, but I had gained some self differentiation and I wasn't worried about, see, if you're still enmeshed, then you're still worried about what is everybody going to think? What is everybody
Mm-hmm.
going to think about our church? What is everybody going to think about our leadership? What is everybody going to, and it's like, wait a minute, your differentiation should help you with that.
Hmm.
That's what should help you, but you don't have it.
Well, so where do people learn that though? I think there's a dearth of places,
Oh,
where do you even learn it? Like if you can't learn it in church, something has been lost.
well, and
That
in
might
fact,
have been where it was once
church,
learned, but
the church unfortunately can be
hmm.
an amplifier of enmeshment, and because we're all close, we're all one,
Hmm.
we're all one body under, we're all blah, 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 and everybody's looking for connection, but you cannot have connection without separateness.
Hmm.
There is no intimacy without separateness or distance. If it's like this, you're not being intimate. This is not intimate if you're over here. This is intimacy.
Hmm.
A closeness, but a separateness or
Hmm.
a differentiation
Yeah,
emotionally.
yeah.
And churches will, accent the other part, not the differentiation part, because we want you to all believe the same things, keep bringing your money here, and I'm not against churches or pastors. I love many of them. But it's we all got to do this thing together and have community, and we all got to be one big close community. And it's like, wait a
Hmm.
minute, what about the people that all grew up with too much enmeshment, which is probably most of them?
Yeah.
And now do you know what you're amplifying here?
Well, I do know that's a strain of things, and it goes out. It's outside the church as well as the emphasis on
Oh,
community. But as a
that's
person who grew up grew up in Berkeley and the hippie thing, I think community is overrated as the total answer to everything. You can't crowdsource everything. You actually do need like a sense of right and wrong. You need a moral compass that will keep you steady even when everyone around you is losing their minds and, reverting into
but but you
toddler behavior.
have but you have to have a level of self differentiation
Well,
to
you
be in
do.
that position.
Well, you
You
do. And
you have to have.
even to recover from trauma, you end up
Oh,
you end up with a lot of you take a bunch of crap from people who are not comfortable with somebody who recovered and sort of broke the agreement that we're all just going to be fuck ups together, excuse my French.
right.
And we're all just going to be that way, and now you think you're better than me, so every move you make you begin to offend people, and so you have to. That's been my personal healing from trauma. My family has rejected me for healing. When I first got into Al-Anon, they scoffed and rolled their eyes and were like, oh,
And
it's so California. And it's like, yeah,
and
except you know how half the family drinks themselves to death? I don't know. Seems like a thing.
we can kind of compare this here, my
I
recovery.
know it doesn't seem crazy that I would want to get help, but I'm interviewing you, but I'll tell you my victory is that when my book came out, the family members who are still alive embraced it, read it, and told me how much they appreciated it. And my stepdad, who died a few months ago, the last picture of
Oh
him that I
my.
have was he was sitting in a cafe reading my book, like allowing it to be on Facebook, allowing it to be known, like he gave his approval for this. And
Wow.
I think the reverberation, it was like 20 cannons going off across the ages. It's like Anna Runkle just got the hex has been canceled. You
The
know,
curse has
she is
been
okay.
broken.
Yeah, she's allowed to
Right.
heal. And so
Well,
that's a funny thing to happen
and,
in your healing too, after you've given up all hope. Like your healing can't depend on approval from them, but then I got a little bit.
If you, and that's a wonderful story. I'm sorry you
Yeah.
lost your father.
Thanks. Yeah.
The why do families not rejoice at someone getting healthy?
I know. I mean, I assume you've dealt with this yourself, and I'm sure in your therapist days you helped many other people through it. But especially if you go to, I went to Al-Anon. It's a program for families and friends of alcoholics, which would imply that drinking a gallon of vodka a day is what? Alcoholism? Are you, who the hell do you think you are, Miss High Horse, Fancy Pants?
Really?
Yes.
Really?
So they didn't like it, but I will admit that when I first, for me to find that 30 years ago was so exciting, and somebody showed me my daily practice techniques, and I like popped out of suicidal depression, and I was on fire. I'm like, everybody, there's something that helps. And I was trying to show everybody, and I hoped that my family would be excited. I had an older brother, and he did try the daily practice, although died of an overdose, soon afterwards anyway. But he tried, and when I was cleaning out his
Right.
apartment, I found his 12-step work that I had encouraged him to try. And then my stepdad, too, on his bed after he died, when we went to go clean out his home a few months ago, my siblings and me, they talk about family. We're not that connected as a family, and we were all in the home, and we
Oh,
cleaned out
wow.
layers of hoarding, and there were literally like dead rats under piles of papers and things, and unopened mail from 30 years since my mom died, and it was pretty heavy. And But on his bed was my book, and many, many pages where he had been writing his fears and resentments. He had been giving it a go in the end. So,
Oh, wow.
something happened. But it's funny how I don't think family members have ever apologized to me. But a couple people have in my life in a way that was meaningful. But I'm a big stickler that, like, your healing can't depend on them changing, right?
It,
It sounds like that's what your teaching is about, that it's not really about what they do, it's about your differentiation from it.
exactly.
Yeah.
And just because we have changed our emotional and mental location in the system, in the
Hmm.
family system, by recovery, doesn't mean they want to change their emotional and mental location. But we're kind of pushing them to because we're so interconnected. So that's why there's the rebellion and, well, whoa, you think you're healthy now and you think you're somebody, and they want you to change back. They want you to be in the same misery and the same emotional family system that we had.
Yeah.
Just all stay down there in the
Yeah.
mud. And when you start to come up from that, we have to learn to resist their resistance, and understanding that we can do that.
What would be some of the practical steps that somebody could take to start working on their differentiation? I know offer a course in this.
It's called The Road to Self, and it's an online program. I've got a free training that anybody can have, building a self you were never allowed to have. And then if you want to do the program, you can.
Hmm.
Um, and it is steps and ways to begin to learn to see the system and learn to see the family and how it functions and how you function in it. Because if you can see how you function in it and in your other relationships as well, you've just jumped 10 points in learning about being your true self.
Hmm.
And also learning to detach. How do we do that? But why should I detach if I don't even think I'm enmeshed? So I have to recognize, what's this enmeshment all about? Well, enmeshment is one of those classic things. Okay, if your family all had a Christmas or holiday gathering and you go home, when you go home, how you feel
Hmm.
is that enmeshment pull.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like a kid, and I feel like they're all parenting me, and everybody's kind of doing their same old thing that they did 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And it feels I don't feel that adult that I feel when I'm away from them. That's that invisible enmeshment that we don't see.
Yeah.
And even though we leave it and feel like we're adults, we haven't left it yet. It's just we've left them and we're not being reminded of it. And so we just kind of push it back down and push it away and go, okay, I'm the adult now. But then we'll find we still will behave in a way like we were still in the family. And in that position in the family, we'll still find ourselves behaving in similar ways. And so I think to break that connection or to interrupt that connection, and that's one of the work that I do to help people interrupt that connection so they can then be themselves. Also learning about the pseudo self. What's a pseudo self? What's a not real self? Well, that was everything I was before I was 30, 32 years old. It was all a pseudo self. I don't know that much of anything was really me. I don't know what really me was. I couldn't have told you. I couldn't have even told you. It didn't mean I didn't have interests. I like chocolate ice cream over, vanilla ice cream. Okay, that's maybe real me. Alrighty. But a lot of other things and emotional dynamics, I didn't have that. So I work on being able to see and putting on systems glasses, which is huge. And then also working on let's remove the pseudo self layers. And the pseudo self layers are, every time somebody says, I just don't like your hair. I just don't like the way you're combing your hair. It's just, I don't know if that's attractive for you. And we feel we're triggered, right? We have that triggering. Then we have to work on why the triggering. Now, we can give lots of examples, CPTSD, we could trauma, and it could be lots of layers. But at least for sure, you are over close to that person if you give your power away in that way. So if somebody comes to my office and say, Jerry, I remember years ago I talked about, you're the worst therapist in the world. My wife and I have had so many fights since our last session, and you're terrible as a therapist. With the work of self-differentiation, I can say, you're probably right. Now, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
If you notice, I have inner boundaries and I'm not enmeshed with them.
Yeah.
They're not able to play me like a puppet in those strings. I need to begin to cut those, not in a way to not be compassionate to them, but if you notice, I'm even being more compassionate now that I've cut those strings.
Yeah, yeah.
I can actually be more compassionate.
Yeah.
And more caring as an adult.
With the little time that we have left, which we barely do, I had just a little question. How did you end up on YouTube? That's such a bold choice.
Oh my gosh! Well, because I look like Brad Pitt, and I'm just smart and talk so well and all that stuff. No, it wasn't any of that. What I felt, as just like with you, what has helped transform me, I wanted to give to other people, and I wanted to pay it forward. Mm-hmm. And so I had a director of a counseling center that I worked for, and he was very supportive of me after I'd lost everything, and it's a whole mess. And that he was very supportive, and he was doing videos on YouTube, which I thought was great. But I was, I came from more the traditional therapy. You don't do this YouTube stuff. You do it in the office. People show up, blah, blah, blah. The whole traditional therapist. You wear a tie. That's my age. That's what you're supposed to do. And then began to realize, wait a minute. I really want to offer this in whatever way I can for people because it helped change my life. And I've always believed anything worth doing, which has helped me, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. And so I started doing it poorly.
Yeah.
And continued on from there because I'm a perfectionist, so I never could start it because, well, it wouldn't be a perfect video. What if I said the wrong thing? What if I said something I didn't mean? What if I,
What if the
what if I
people
did
in the
that
comments
right?
are brutal, which they are sometimes?
Oh, yes. And right now I'm
Differentiation, right?
putting myself, but that's right. Am I going to not care? Because I don't need to care about that. And if I do care, what part of my family am I living out here if I do care too much about that? And the Wi-Fi of my family. And that I wanted to start and just start and go and just start. If nobody listened, then nobody listened. I still am doing what I feel I should do. And fortunately, it's turned around that people did want to listen.
Thank you, Jerry. Where can people find you?
Generally, people can just type in the name Jerry Wise, and that will bring up all the links. But it's officially Jerry Wise Relationship Systems.com. And then I have a YouTube channel with that, and Instagram, TikTok. I've got, the different social medias. But basically, Jerry Wise would probably get you there.
Okay.
And that's been a real help.
Okay, great. That's how I looked you up. I was just Jerry Wise, and you did come right up. Thank you, Jerry. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Anna. It has been a pleasure, much so.
You'll find links to Jerry Wise's material down below in the description section.